Welcome back to another edition of Rutherford Rants Wrestling. This past weekend was WrestleMania, and I could care less. Being a wrestling fan is nothing to brag about, ever. It's the most embarrassing thing to really admit to anyone, especially, I think I've said it before, like, it's the last thing I tell someone who I'm trying to have sex with. It's the last thing I tell them about me, that I'm into this phony baloney bullshit. But what really drives me crazy are when the fanboy types, and it's hard to describe the types of wrestling fans, because I feel like and Berger would agree with me on this, like they feel like they see us all the same. And that's kind of how it feels, which is why there's some wrestling fans who are very shameful about it. And we kind of hide it enough to where obviously I'm talking about on a podcast and it's one thing, but in public, in real life, you wouldn't just, I'm not going to necessarily openly tell someone, hey, I'm a giant wrestling fan. I like professional wrestling. I would wait and, even if I heard them mention it, I would be a little more cautious, oh shit. Then you got the fans who are the same nerdy level that maybe me and Berger are, where it's we know the inside terms and all the backstory and stuff, but they don't hide it. And so they think that it's something that's cool to be that way, or it's a badge of honor. And a lot of those guys, they all really, they're just fucking losers. Wrestling fans, we're all kind of just losers. But those guys, to me, as a wrestling fan, are the biggest losers. And a lot of that's because they all want to be included in something. These are the same guys who will go and they'll buy replica championship belts and go to shows and carry around their belt, or they'll go on social media and they'll cut really bad promos on other people, who they're having maybe an internet feud with or something. Kind of like the video that there was a video that you sent me, you as in, I'm talking to Tim off the screen. You sent me a video of a guy cutting a promo and then having another dude come in who's and I'm the alpha. They were obviously wrestling fans. These guys wanted to be wrestling fans, or they are wrestling fans. They want to be wrestlers. And that's the thing about so many wrestling fans. They a lot of them wish they were wrestlers. They wish that they were a part of that. So when they're accepted, or they're treated like they're accepted by wrestlers, they tend to get off on that. And then it's a very fanboy kind of attitude. They will blindly then follow along like a puppy dog. I was watching an episode of The Office recently, and on Peacock, actually, they have extended cuts of episodes. And actually, it's funny because I was saying this for years when they were on Netflix, because I remember back in the day buying The Office on DVD, and they would have deleted scenes from each episode. And I didn't have cable, so you watch all the episodes, then you go through all the DVD extras because you don't have anything really else to watch. And so then you watch the commentary, and the commentary is with all the cast, and the cast would talk about how a lot of these episodes, they would have storylines that you never see on the screen because they had to cut it for time purposes. And so they have these extended cuts now on Peacock that have those deleted scenes intermixed in with the episodes now. And it's pretty cool to watch it all as one. It's I think I love The Office, and I mean, that doesn't make me unique in any way, but it was just cool to see these full episodes. Well, there was an episode I was watching where Dwight and Michael go to a sales convention, and they meet up with Jim and Jim's new boss, because Jim had just left Scranton, and Michael is jealous of Jim's new boss. And so then Dwight, who's his lackey, he sends to try to find dirt on this new boss. And then throughout the episode, which wasn't a part of the actual original showing or what, like the original cut of the episode, they have all these scenes where Dwight is now, because there's nothing nefarious about this new boss that Jim has. And he's actually like, does like, rock climbing, or there's stuff that he's done. So then Dwight becomes enamored with him to where he's like kissing his ass now the rest of the episode and like being a puppy dog to this new, I want to say his name was Josh, this Josh manager guy. And that's kind of the way wrestling fans act towards wrestlers who give them attention in a positive way, where there's a guy named Vince Russo. Most wrestling fans know this guy is just this guy who has the most really ridiculous ideas for wrestling. And it's always, you could tell what's a Russo. It's become like a descriptive word for bad wrestling. Oh man, that was Russo. That was total Russo shit. But you still have wrestling fans who are like his lackeys who run his podcast and then we'll interview him. Hey, Vince, what would you do about this right now? And then Vince would be like, he's from New York and he's just this real idiot. Bro, you know what I would do? It's wrestling. It's fake. It's wrestling. I would do this. And they still listen to this idiot's opinion, even though we know that when he was in charge of the wrestling companies, he was doing stupid shit. So my whole point is that there's a whole world of these fanboys who cling on to something and then blindly love whatever it is that they're doing. I had an altercation with some of those guys today on the internet, and I felt it's nothing to brag about. I'm not bragging about it. This is more like a confessional. I feel like I'm getting this off. I'm confessing my wrestling sins here. And they made a comment about how something dumb that WWE did, because it was just WrestleMania weekend. And so there's a lot of WWE action going on. And there's something dumb that the WWE did. And in the comment section of this video that was reviewing it, the comment was something along the lines of, the same people that support this ridiculous show are the same ones that talk shit about AEW. And I took offense to that because I talk shit about AEW and I definitely don't support what WWE's doing. So I had to comment. I said, guys, you can't assume that. Why do you assume that? I was like, I dislike both shows. I think there's things wrong in both of them. You should so that just totally defeats what you're saying. And there's like this narrative on the internet with these wrestling fans where it's like, if they're AEW apologists, nothing AEW can do is wrong. And I've gone on about it before in these rants where it's like they're trying to will a wrestling war into existence because they, for whatever reason, they want to be a part of something. Back in the day, there was ECW. And that was like a movement. That was like this thing where it was a cult following and the fans were chanting and it was exciting and they didn't know what was happening. And it was real cutting edge at the time. And all these fucking fans just want to be a part of something like that. So they're trying to will into the existence AEW being good. And they think that if we just believe and our heart is pure, anything can be achieved. And I think that it's obnoxious because they make excuses and turn a blind eye to everything. And so I got into this stupid, keyboard battle with these guys where I was explaining things to them and telling them how, there's a lot of logic and stuff in the shit that they're defending that doesn't make any sense. And then their excuses were just like, oh, see, you just aren't WWE apologist, or, oh, you must not know wrestling. You wouldn't know good wrestling if it was waved right in front of your face. And I'm like, motherfucker, I was like, you put Walter in the ring with anybody and I'm going to be glued to the screen watching him because he is a person a character who plays the part to the fullest, not like a method actor. It's just, you could believe that guy is out there trying to fucking just beat the crap out of somebody. A lot of the problem with what is going on is that these fanboys they apologize for shit because they feel like they're in on it, that they're in. So when a wrestler uses an industry terms, and the person watching, they get, oh, I know what he means there. Oh, oh, I'm a part of it. Yay. It's like, you're a fucking loser. Like, that doesn't make it any good. If I've said it, it's like I keep repeating myself, but like, if Daniel Day-Lewis stopped in the middle of There Will Be Blood and said, I'm going to win an Oscar for my role here, and then went back to acting, you'd be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he do that? But Kenny Omega can go out and cut a promo where he says, who has 7-star matches? Who has the best kind of matches? And it's like, motherfucker, your character is supposed to be a combat fighter. You're supposed to be someone who's trying to win. But every time you go out and you have a match like it's the last match you're ever going to have. And then you go, look at my performance. Wasn't my performance great? And all these nerds go, well, he's so good. That performance was so good. He's great at wrestling. No, he's good at doing gymnastics and dancing. But if you want to be good at wrestling, you should be good all around. You should stick to what's going on. So if Kenny Omega has a close match with the guy who's really not on his level, afterwards he should be pissed off that he didn't defeat the guy really quick. But instead he says, who has the best performances? Who's the best at performing and doing flips and flops and slapping my leg? Who's the best at doing that? Oh, I am, because the guy who reviews the show after it's done gives me the best grades. Ooh. And you completely destroy any credibility that you would have as a character on a television show that people are supposed to be invested in. It doesn't make sense. If someone like Tim is watching the show and doesn't know the inside terms, and he hears someone talking about, I have 7-star matches, then that person's going to go, what is that? What's a 7-star? What does that have to do? Is that like a rating? What does that mean? Who rates the matches? What does that have to do with the show? Like, is there a judge out there that's scoring things? Like, there's so much that is so inside. But since these fucking losers just want to be a part of something, oh, I'm a part. Oh, he's speaking to me. And then what ends up happening is slowly over time, they start to realize, well, none of this is making any sense. I'm mad at them now. They don't make sense anymore. There's a wrestling reviewer named Dave Meltzer. He's the most famous wrestling reviewer. He's the one who they refer to when it's like the star ratings. And for years, he seemed to be like the go-to, the Roger Ebert of wrestling, where it was like, if you just see, what did Meltzer give that match? You see a match, you're like, man, that was really good. And Burger judges everything on cheeseburgers, right? So like Burger sees something, and Burger has a really strict grading scale, which is actually, I honestly, the Burger scale is kind of what I go by now on ratings, just in the sense of like, I can trust that if Burger says this was 5-star or 5 cheeseburgers, I know that it's going to be very good. But nowadays with Dave Meltzer, he's so liberal with things. He started giving things 7 stars, which is what Kenny Omega brags about. So then you have, if Dave Meltzer gives something 5 stars, it's like, well, am I really going to enjoy that? Like, am I going to enjoy what Dave Meltzer thinks is a 5-star match now? Because a lot of times the matches that he has given that distinction to, it's nonsense matches. It's flips and flops and dives and slaps and high impact moves that you would think would cripple someone that they're kicking out of. So it completely destroys the use of those moves ever, to where the point where it just becomes, like if you come out and if you are watching hardcore pornography and you're watching penetration, you're watching dick going to pussy and ass and 2 dicks going into pussy or whatever, and you're watching all that shit, you're not going to go to jerking it to some sort of like Cinemax or HBO style porn where you're just looking at a naked chick. Like, that's not going to, you become desensitized. Like, it doesn't, so when you see all of that, it's it's just like, ugh. That's the equivalent to a lot of these matches that Dave Meltzer's going gaga over, where it's like, really? Because it's no different than the other matches that happen on the show where they're diving and flipping and flopping and doing whatever. He made so anyways, Dave Meltzer, he's been defending AEW since their inception. He's been making excuses about their ideas. He's been just everything, apologist. And he's been reinforcing the booker, the guy who runs the show, Tony Khan. He's been reinforcing all the bad ideas that this idiot's had. And then recently, just like in the last week or so, there was a video release where Dave Meltzer was talking about the problems with AEW's booking. And it's like, dude, you're saying the shit that me and Berger have definitely been saying for almost their entire run. You're complaining about it just now. So it just shows that Dave Meltzer, because these guys took his grading serious and they named moves after him, he became a fanboy for them. So then he starts making excuses for all of them, for anything they do. And then now, because it's gotten to a point where it's super nonsense what they're doing, he's starting to go, guys, we got it. You should fix. There's a lot of stuff that kind of needs to be fixed. And he's like saying it on his show, but he's not calling out Tony Khan, who's the booker. He's not calling him out by name. He's just going like, there's some things that need to be fixed. And to me, it's the equivalent of the guy who you're like, yo, Tim, your wife's getting basted by a bunch of different dudes. And like, we saw it happen and we need to let you know. And you're like, nah, it's not happening. It's not happening. And we're like, dude, we saw it happen. And then a month later, you come into the room and you're like, guys, I think my wife might be cheating on me. It's like, no fucking shit, you dumb idiot. Like, no shit, Dave Meltzer, that their shit doesn't make any sense. Because it doesn't make sense, and it hasn't made sense since day one. But yet you give Tony Khan the award of Booker of the Year, so then Tony Khan comes on TV and he's like, I'm the Booker of the Year, I'm the Promoter of the Year, yay me, yay Tony. And then he keeps doing the same dumb shit. But there's no difference between Tony Khan and Vince Russo. They just had a match where they put arcade machines around the ring because the guys like video games. And they had this arcade style, like arcade fight where they were beating each other up with like arcade games and Legos and shit. Vince Russo used to do like pinata on a pole match and stupid shit like that. And everyone would be like, oh, he's ruining the business. He's ruining the business. But Tony Khan doesn't. It's, oh, yay, Tony. Oh, it's neat because I like video games. I like Legos. And oh, because it's on AEW, that means it's really good. Oh, it's so great. Yay. Yay. No, it's fucking stupid. If Vince Russo put on a video game match, everyone would be like, God, Vince Russo fucking sucks. Tony Khan fucking sucks. He fucking sucks. He has no good ideas. He has no good sports ideas. He runs the worst fucking team in the NFL. They're getting the first pick in the draft, not because they're good, because they fucking suck. He runs a football team, football as in soccer team, over in Europe, and they fucking suck too, and everyone hates him. So he's putting all of his time in this phony baloney fucking wrestling show, and he can't even get that right. There's a match called War Games. War Games is a match that happened back in the 80s in the NWA, which became WCW. And it's a match where you have two rings and there's a cage over both rings, and it's supposed to be this bloody kind of the end all match, like the match that you put like where there's a feud going and the guys go in there, two teams, and they go in there and they just beat each other bloody, and it's a spectacle. So in AEW, since the WWE owns the trademark for that name, War Games, AEW decided that they were going to have the match, but they were going to call it something different. So last year, right before the pandemic shut everything down, they were advertising a match, and they were going to call it Blood and Guts. And Blood and Guts is supposed to be their War Games. And then the pandemic hit, and since they couldn't have it in front of a live crowd, they ex-nayed it. No, we're not going to do it. And it was going to be between Chris Jericho's crew of dudes and then like Omega and the Young Bucks and their crew. But then they shut it down. So it was basically going to be the same idiots who were in that football field match that was really fucking stupid. And they were going to be in a War Games. So then fast forward a year later, and now Chris Jericho and MJF, they split up. So MJF now has a crew, and Jericho's crew's good guys. And I'm not even get into all the stupid shit of how they rushed that back in like, that's just bad booking how they rushed it. But they rushed it to a War Games. So they're having a War Games match, the first match that the two groups are facing against each other. They're not even doing a series of matches where it's like the tag teams that are in the factions face each other, and Jericho and MJF are going to face each other, and the two musclehead guys, they're going to face each other, and then you build it and you make it go down the line to where you actually build to the need to have this giant fucking War Games match. Instead, because Tony Khan is probably, I made the comment to a friend, I feel bad for any woman who has sex with Tony Khan because he's only worrying about getting off himself, because he's just putting this match out now, I think May 5th. So now he's not even doing it on a pay-per-view. He's doing it on TV, and he's doing it as the first match that these two factions are going to be in. So where do you even go from there? Where you really can't go anywhere from there. If you're trying, I mean, you can, but it's going to be pointless because you've already seen them in the match where they're going to get all bloody and like beat the shit out of each other. So then it's like afterwards, I'm supposed to go like, oh, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep having matches. That's the thing that drove a shitload of people off from wrestling in the first place. When you would have the same match every fucking pay-per-view, for 3 months, 4 months at a time, you would have the same main event where it's like, why do I need to see this? I really don't care. It means that when I spent $50, $60 last month to watch their match, it means nothing now because now I'm spending another $50 or $60 if I want to see them have a match again. So that means there was no solution when I paid for. When you're doing a pay-per-view, it should be the solution. If you're buying a UFC pay-per-view, it's a fight between two guys and there's going to be, or gals, and there's going to be a winner. And the winner is going to be the champion, or they're going to move up in ranking or whatever. If there's a controversial finish, maybe you'll have a rematch. If there's a new champion, then there might be a rematch later on down the road. But in wrestling, when you just have a match and it ends, and then the next month, just because you're lazy and you can't think of any fucking ideas, you go, oh, well, we're just going to have them have a match again, but just have them do something different. Like there's no need. So now that's what's going to happen with the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle. These two factions are going to have a War Games match and then just continue on afterwards having more matches against each other. No, that's fucking stupid. That doesn't make sense. It's probably what they'll do, but it's fucking stupid and it doesn't make sense. What else is fucking stupid is how they don't think past the surface of anything. And that's how a lot of these wrestling fans think. They don't think past the surface. They just like to see what's happening in front of them like a goldfish and they're fine. And that's not acceptable to me because as I'm watching, I see it and I go, well, that's dumb. I don't like that. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would that happen? Here's an example. I'll give two examples. Here's an example of this idea not working. Jon Moxley and the Young Bucks team up to face Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers. Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers and the Young Bucks all used to be in a crew together. So Jon Moxley is in a feud with Omega, and the Young Bucks are kind of like supposedly not aligning with Kenny Omega anymore. So they're going to team with Jon Moxley and they're going to have this big match. So on television, they have this match. They go 15 minutes. They're fighting. And then the Young Bucks they're doing all their spots and their stuff, their moves to Omega, but they just can't finish him. So then they're ready to finish him again, like do a move to him that's really going to knock him out. And then they just can't do it. They don't have the heart to do it. Kenny Omega's like, oh, Oh, please don't. And Moxley's getting upset. Finish him. Finish him. So then Moxley goes in there and does it himself. But then the Young Bucks beat up Moxley. And then the guy who's Kenny Omega's manager, Don Callis, is on commentary. And the commentators are going, the Young Bucks were with you all along. And Don Callis, I hope you enjoyed the show, boys. And he's insinuating that the Young Bucks were always aligned with Omega and the Good Brothers, and that this was a setup and a trap. If this was what storytelling? They couldn't finish off Omega, and they had a change of heart. But it was a setup and a trap, according to the commentary that they laid down. Okay? So if it's a setup and you're on his team, what made you think that there was going to be a moment where you were going to be able to do your maneuver to Omega and have Jon Moxley get upset while he's standing on the sideline for you not doing your maneuver? If this is a whole setup, and it's like, okay, we're going to have this match where you go full bore and you're beating this guy up for 20 minutes and just to get to a point where Jon Moxley can go, oh, finish him off. And then you can turn on him. That's illogical. That does not make sense. What does make sense, if you were to do something like that, was back in the day, your boy the Mime, before he was the Mime, when he was the Surfer Sting, Sting was recruited by Ric Flair to be his tag team partner. Now, Ric Flair and Sting had always been enemies for the most part, and Sting said, I don't know if I could trust you. Ric Flair says, you could trust me. I need your help to help me fight Ric Flair's old best friend, Arn Anderson, and his new protege, Brian Pillman. I need you to be my partner. So Sting is apprehensive. He doesn't want to trust Ric Flair. But by the time for the pay-per-view, Ric Flair has earned Sting's trust. So then before the match, you find out that someone has attacked Ric Flair in the back. And they think it was Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman. And they don't know if he's going to even make it to the match. So the match starts, and it's just Sting out there against Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson. And Sting's kind of holding his own, and then right as Sting needs help, here comes Ric Flair with a bandage on his forehead, coming out to save the day. Sting finally gets close to tag Flair. He tags Flair in. Flair comes in. Arn Anderson backs off like, oh no, don't, no. And Flair does a strut and then fucking punches Sting in the face. And the three of them beat the crap out of Sting and they leave the ring. Ric Flair didn't fight anyone that he was siding with. There wasn't any kind of illogical happenstance that needed to happen in order for the twist to work. It worked because they set it up. He didn't have to fight in the match at all because he was attacked. He faked an injury to have Sting come out there, and then he beat Sting up when they had the opportunity to do it. That made perfect sense. The Young Bucks joining sides with Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers doesn't make any sense because they were fighting and beating the crap out of Kenny Omega right up until the last seconds of the match. And they weren't doing it in a way that was like, oh, well, you could tell the whole time they weren't really going at it. It was like, no, what they were doing is they were pretending and they were having a match. And then it was like, okay, then that's when we're going to have our swerve. And everyone's going to think it's great storytelling because Kenny was doing his acting. And it didn't make any fucking sense. But they use inside terms and they use verbiage that people, the fanboys, understand and they get. And so they make excuses for when they blur those lines. So when Kenny Omega talks about being a champion, but also getting 7 stars, they go, well, he does get 7 stars. But it doesn't make sense in the movie. Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis does win Oscars, but if he talked about it out of character in the middle of the movie, you'd be like, that doesn't, now I've checked out of the movie. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Daniel Day-Lewis. Thank you. But even the fucking, like the Dave Meltzer types who are like, oh, there's things wrong with the storytelling. It's like they had a match. There's a Dave Meltzer's co-host, Brian Alvarez, had a show recently where him and an old wrestler were talking about this big bloody women's brawl that they had. And this is more to the point that I was getting to with like War Games. They had this incredible bloody brawl, and like it was entertaining. There was a lot of stuff that they did where like little tweaks, but there's a point where you know, it's like little tweaks you can look past in a match. Like there's the style that these folks wrestle with is it's a high impact. So they do moves where it's like, it should be the end of the match where you're like, oh my gosh, like if that was real, that would paralyze somebody. And then they kick out and then they do a million different other high impact moves. If you took that, so they had a good modern match. They were bloody. It was like something you never really saw women do. And it was the whole talk of the internet. And so the next week, they come back and they have the gal that lost the match, and they have her come out and like tell everyone to give her a standing ovation and like, you know, let's hear it for her. And then she starts talking about how great, you know, like as if she's like this made gal, like great performer. And the old wrestler was talking to Brian Alvarez and saying, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't the winner, Thunder Rosa, why didn't Thunder Rosa come out first? If I was Thunder Rosa, I would be pissed because I just had this match and Britt Baker is the one who they highlight first and they say how great you did and how it was all her. And Brian Alvarez is going, wow, but that just means Thunder Rosa has to come out next week and answer and reply. And Lance Storm is like, no, because they just had the match that's supposed to be the last match they have. They had the big bloody blowout brawl. Their storyline is over. If you keep going, how can they top that? They can't have another match besides killing themselves that's going to top what they did. So how does it make sense for them to have Britt Baker come out and then boost Britt Baker up and then have Thunder Rosa reply? Thunder Rosa won. She shouldn't be worried even about Britt Baker at all because it's over with. But since everything is catered towards like the fucking losers, the fanboys, they all go, oh, yeah, well, you know, it was a great match. You know, Britt Baker, she's so great. Oh, yeah. Oh, so, yeah, of course. Oh, it's great. Well, I mean, come on, this is great booking. How do you not like it? I mean, it's long-term storytelling because now next week, Thunder Rosa has to come out and say, it's like, no, it makes no fucking sense. It makes no fucking sense. I don't know how many fucking times I have to say that, but it doesn't. It makes no sense. It's not that fucking hard to make sense. As I mentioned earlier, Walter has the best match of the whole WrestleMania weekend with Tommaso Ciampa. He didn't do a bunch of fucking dives and flips and flops and leg slaps and unnecessary high impact moves. There was a couple near falls in the match where personally I was like, that could have been the end of the match, and it wasn't. But again, that's picking that shit out of pepper compared to a lot of these fucking problems that are going on in other wrestling shows. And like, I have all this shit to say about AEW because it's the only one that has any kind of hope for any change. WWE is being run by a 75-year-old man who has all these phony rules in place for the entire company to follow there for no reason. Like, there's legitimately no reason. I didn't see the show last night, so I can't comment exactly what it was, but supposedly there was some sort of box that was there, and they were not allowed to call it a box. They had to call it a squared structure, whatever, some verbiage, the WWE garbage, medical facility, championship opportunity, entertainment, the biggest show in entertainment. No one talks like that, but yet everyone in the WWE talks like that. So no wonder why it's just a brand, which is why there's only hope for AEW to somehow close the gap. It's not far out of the realm of possibility for WWE's flagship show to drop down to 1.5 million viewers a week. I mean, it's flirting with less than 2 million quite regularly. So it's not hard to believe that if they keep going the same trajectory that they're going, that they could lose another 500,000 people from watching the show every week because of how fucking terrible it is. So then when you're AEW and you're this new company, when your very first show you did was a 1.5 million people, you know at least, hey, there's 1.5 million people who know who we are. Now, whether or not we can retain them is a whole other thing because we haven't been able to retain them. But we know at least for the very first episode, we had 1.5 million people watch us. So we know that our name's out there. So then they could take, if they wanted to, they could take the billionaires' money that they have and they could throw it towards like someone like John Cena who has name recognition and like star power. And you can throw John Cena $10 million or some shit, tell him to come in. And then WWE, if they're on the downslope and they don't have any stars because all they do is they focus on their brand. Everything is about the brand. And everyone always bitches about a thing called 50-50 booking, which is like you win one, I win one. You win one, I win one. And that's how WWE normally operates. That guy wins one, then the next week they wrestle again and the other guy wins. And it's this thing to keep everyone lukewarm. So then when Vince McMahon decides he wants to play with one of his toys, they heat it up and they think that's effective. And it's not because everyone sees right through it. AEW does the same thing of 50-50 booking. It's just not with the results. Kenny Omega goes out and has a 20-minute match with some fucking loser and he still wins, but the loser hung with him. So in the eyes of the viewer, they're just go, well, he barely was able to beat that fucking jabroni. Like, who gives a shit? At least for me, that's how I would look at it. Because, like, if you have John Jones go out there and fight some fucking fat schlub and he goes 5 rounds with him, you're going to go, fuck, why didn't John Jones knock that guy out in 15 seconds? Like, what the fuck? He should knock that guy out. So WWE, the problem with them, like I said, is they have these fucking rules. Well, a lot of them are in place because they don't want anyone to get bigger than the brand. Because the last time they had people get bigger than the brand, they ditched them. When the Rock was bigger than the brand, he left for Hollywood and didn't come back. WWE didn't get any cut of his Hollywood money, so they were pissed. And they were left in the lurch. Brock Lesnar didn't want to do their fucking travel schedule. And so he just up and left them because he didn't give a shit about what was going on. He just cared about his money. Good for him. So now what they've done is they've installed this thing where everyone is like team players. And there's like locker room leaders and they all buy into the bullshit that what they're doing actually means anything. But in the meantime, you have 2 nights of WrestleMania and I can only make it through a fucking hour of it without turning it off. And then the whole entire second day, I slept right through because it was fucking boring and awful. And when you have the most fucking milquetoast, boring announcers saying your verbiage over and over again, championship opportunities, the biggest night in entertainment, medical facility. You know, they can't say hospital. They're not allowed to say hospital on their television. They have to say local medical facility. They're not allowed to say I'm having a title shot. In a real fight, like, I want a shot at the title. Give me a shot at the title. If they say that, they get in trouble. They're not allowed to say wrestling. There's wrestling in the name of the company, and they're not allowed to say that. So it's hopeless with them. And then people think, oh, well, when Vince McMahon goes away, everything will be fine. Everything is going to be fine when Vince McMahon goes away. Well, no. how are we to know that Vince McMahon isn't just going to sell the company out from underneath right before he retires? We don't know that. He just sold all of his streaming rights to his network to Peacock, so now it's on Peacock, and they don't even have a network anymore. So then how do we know that when Vince McMahon's like, you know what, I'm ready to retire and fuck it, I'm going to sell it. So then they sell it to, let's say, Disney or even Peacock, NBC. So then NBC starts to run the WWF, but since Vince McMahon's out of the picture, maybe they have some people in place, but how are they going to structure their show? Well, how did Vince do it? I mean, obviously Vince, he was the guy. That's the guy. He's the dude. Like, how else did Vince, Vince is the man. How did he do it? So then the show would just be someone's interpretation of Vince McMahon style wrestling. Vince McMahon style wrestling is awful. So really, I mean, there's no fixing WWE. So the reason why you get so fucking worked up about AEW is because there's so much potential there that could happen to have a show where the Burger and Kirk type wrestling fans would get excited about. But that could also excite the fucking fanboy types as well. Because the fanboy types are going to be there. The guys who are in the video going, it's still real to me, damn it. Those guys are going to be there. The ones that aren't there are the ones who are like, this fucking shit's stupid. And I was embarrassed before, but I'm even more embarrassed now. So I'm not even going to fucking watch it. Like, it'd be one thing if it was something where it's like, oh yeah, I know it's phony, but it's actually pretty good. Check it out. I mean, Burger and I have done that with Tim on certain stuff, and there's been stuff that Tim has seen where he's like, I actually enjoyed that. But a lot of it was either old stuff, and if it was anything new, I think it might have been Walter, where he showed him Walter and was like, well, it actually feels like that was a real, like he was kind of fighting him a little bit, like where it was a little more realistic. So it's like, if you don't have to the point where it's not embarrassing, where it's like, what the fuck are you watching, you fucking fat loser? It's more like, oh, okay, I kind of see it. All right. And even if that was the reaction that you got from people that weren't fans, that's a lot better than going, why the fuck is that asshole putting his hands in his pockets and then barely kicking that guy in the legs? Makes no sense. Anyways. Well, the long and short of it is eventually everyone who is watching wrestling now will come around and see how bad it is at some point. It's only a matter of time. The wrestling fans, most of them, a lot of the losers are very late to the party. So they might still be listening to like Insane Clown Posse and like shit that was out in like 2000 that was good when like wrestling was good. That's the kind of shit, where it's like wrestling is such a snapshot of that, where like the theme song of their show that's happening in 2010 was by some fucking band that was big in 2002 or some shit. It's like their new song, and it's like cock rock, it's like the late, like I said, late to the party. Imagine, no one's gonna really have a reference here, but it's imagine that TikTok that you sent to the group message, Tim, like that, like those people there, the fucking ones who are gonna show up to the show with the wrestling belts and act like they're fucking in the show. And they just wanted to be, that's the thing, they just wanted to be involved. And so then when you have fucking like loser fucking fanboy fans, if you feed the fanboys, they're gonna be, oh yay. So like the Omegas and the Young Bucks, when they do the shit, when they make you feel like you're included with the stupid shit that they do, you immediately become an apologist for them, and then you are then defending them to death on the internet and sound like a fucking jackass the whole time you're doing it, because your whole excuse is, oh, you just don't get it. Oh, you obviously don't like wrestling then. It's like, no, I like wrestling. What you're watching isn't wrestling. What you're watching is gymnastics. And if they started having judges out there to score the performances, then what these guys are talking about and bragging about on the actual show as the character will then become valid. And you go, oh, that guy's pretty good at what he's doing right now. But until then, that's not the case. Until then, you're just bragging about being the best actor while you're in the movie. And that's not logical. That doesn't make sense. I have a friend who I had a discussion with about wrestling, and we both agree that wrestling needs to be fixed. But his solution was to have a showrunner. Well, it needs to be more like prestige television, like HBO, or there needs to be a showrunner. Think of like Game of Thrones, or fuck, I can't think of another, Walking Dead, or so, one of those, like the prestige Breaking Bad. There needs to be a showrunner. And I said, you mean like a booker? Like wrestling used to have, like a guy who was like in charge of like the direction of where the show was going, and like all the storylines and everything ran through them. And they're a booker? Well, no, not a booker, a showrunner. Like Michael Schur. Michael Schur was the guy who created Parks and Rec and was one of the original writers on The Office. Someone like Michael Schur, have him run the show and be a showrunner. He's probably not a wrestling guy. Well, that's good if he's not a wrestling guy. But if he's not a wrestling guy, he's not going to know how to run a wrestling show. Well, he's probably going to base his wrestling going off of like, what would Vince McMahon do? Well, no, it needs to be like, I want it to be like a single camera shot show where it doesn't have to be at the arena. It could be at their home and stuff like that. I'm like, well, then why does there need to be a ring in an arena? Aren't you just kind of describing like, I don't know, like a kung fu or an action movie where they like fight wherever they're at? What's the reason why there needs to be a arena? Well, just because. You can figure that out as you go. Well, then that makes no sense, because now you're just throwing shit against the wall to see what works. And he's sitting there fighting me multiple times. I've had this conversation multiple times with him. And it's the example of the wrestling fan. They don't look past the surface most of the time. These fucking losers don't look past, like, underneath the sheets or underneath the bed. Like, oh, there's more here. They don't look behind the curtain. He was just going like, he got off on the idea of having a showrunner because that's a buzzword. Ooh, showrunner. And at one point in the WWF, in their hottest period, a guy took over for a year where everything was set up on a fucking silver platter for him, and he just used storyboards and ran a logical show. He was like a showrunner. I'm like, yeah. And if you go back and watch the show, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like he was doing anything that was like breaking like anything of the mold of what WWF already was. He had The Rock handed to him. Like, The Rock was right there. So all you have to do is like, okay, Rock comes out, talks shit, 15 minutes. All right, let's go to the next thing. Like, it's not that fucking hard, because The Rock will go out there and do a lot of his shit on his own, or had maybe a writer with him or whatever. He's basing it because this one particular guy worked. No one's worked since as a writer that's come in. And this guy was a single writer who, not like now how they have a fleet of writers. So he came in and he did storyboards. Okay, great. But like, this friend of mine's example was from like a very brief window in this guy's run. It was like a specific example from an episode of TV, 52 weeks of TV. One episode, you have an example, and then a little bit of a storyline that they didn't even end up following through on. And that's what you're going to base this whole, that's the answer. That's the answer. You got to have a showrunner. It's like, no, you just are, it's wishful thinking because of some fanboy thing that you like. Anyways, WrestleMania sucked. There wasn't anything great that happened. The best part of WrestleMania was the fact that there was a weather delay in the beginning, and you could tell they were panicking. And you could also see right through any kind of promo skills that any of them may have had, because they had to vamp for about 45 minutes. And then they still went out there and they went for almost 5 hours. And it's just like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't bother to watch. I probably would have been put to sleep. But anyways, it's just, these guys just want something to be a part of. They want it to be something that means something. They want it to happen in their time. They've all grown up looking back at the 90s and going like, hearing about ECW and hearing how great it is. But the thing is that you look back at stuff and there's always rose-colored glasses anyways. ECW wasn't really that great. You're just looking at a highlight package of everything. It's like the 90s weren't that great, but when you look at the highlights of the 90s, like, oh, there was some cool shit that happened, or the 80s, or the 60s, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's highlights of cool shit that happened. Like right now in the 2010s, the 2010s, we could probably look back at shit that happened in the 2010s and be like, man, fuck, that was actually kind of cool. But at the time, it was like, this fucking shit sucks. I don't want to be around here. So it's easy to look back at stuff and think that it was great. But to do stuff that was good in the moment to make you totally forget about, there was that, again, to quote The Office, I wish there was some way that someone could tell you were in the good old days when you're there. Like, I guess it's just human nature. But in the 90s, like if you were watching WWF, there was a lot of times where it was like, this is so great. You weren't even thinking about, you were just thinking about what was happening next. And you couldn't wait for what happened next. That's the problem in a nutshell. There's not enough people and fans who want to see what happens next. And until they get something that makes us want to see what happens next, you're going to keep having people critique it and try to give their ideas of what could make it happen. Anyways, you can send us emails at brute.n.fruit@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter. You hit us up. The regular show will be back. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, everyone, take it easy.